the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second. Mr. Red?
Yes, appointments, volunteer baseball coach, Tiverton High School, John Valancourt, girls softball, volunteer coach at the high school, Melissa Gonzalo.
Need to vote.
All those in favor? 2015 budget?
Yeah, very briefly, last Thursday night, the Budget Committee gave preliminary approval to our budget submission. They're going to, I believe, have their final vote this evening, which some of us will be heading over to the town hall to see how that goes, but it would pass without.
Any comments, or they're happy with?
There was just a couple, Laura had just a couple clarify, she just went over the
Questions?
capital, it wasn't even questions, showing the committee members our capital requests.
And was there a preliminary vote at all?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah?
Mr. wasn't Amaranis actually wanted to vote to approve it. He made a motion, but Chris said everything was preliminary until
Okay.
because they didn't have a full body either.
Mr. Amaranti said that he thought the budget was so well done by everyone. He commended us on the budget. And when they said it was preliminary, he said, no, I want this to be the final vote. That's how sure he was of it, which was very nice.
Appreciate that.
And they said it was preliminary, because they're going to put everything together.
Okay.
Okay.
So hopefully tonight we'll have a final vote from the budget committee as to what our budget looks like.
Does anyone else have any questions about the budget? No. Supreme Court decision regarding the writ of certiorari.
Right. As everyone knows, the Supreme Court refused to hear the town council's appeal regarding the Board of Regents' decision to uphold our request that the funds, the $367,000, be turned back over to the school department. At last night's meeting, Mrs. Black gave us a copy of what the one motion was that came out of their discussion. It was 5-1, and it makes no mention of our funds at all, which in my opinion is somewhat disappointing, since we spent the last year and a half arguing the point, and actually going back to 2009, we've been disputing this idea of the total number versus the local number. And unfortunately, the council was silent on it last night, for lack of a better word, it appears. We directed Attorney Robinson and Attorney Damon to try to contact Mr. Attorney Tights to get some answer as to what is the town's position. And Vicki, did you receive anything?
I contacted Mr. Tights on the 6th, by email on the
Excuse me, could you use
16th.
the microphone?
Oh,
please?
sorry.
People are telling them they can't hear.
I contacted Mr. Tights myself by email. Is this on?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. By email on the 16th of March, at which time I got a reply saying that he did not have a copy of the Supreme Court order, which I forwarded to him, and have not heard from him since. This afternoon, after a discussion with Mr. Rurick, I emailed him again, and I still have yet to hear from him.
So what you have in front of you, I've talked to Attorney Robinson and Vicki, conference called a lot this afternoon, and initially I asked Steve, what direction do you want from the committee? And at first, they sent us the resolution, and it's very formal. And I called them back. I said, I don't think we need a resolution. We need do you want motions from the committee direction? Because as of right now, in my opinion, the question is still unanswered. Are we going to get the money back? Steve believes he's seeking permission from the committee for items number 1 and 2 that you have where it be resolved. He's seeking the Tiverton School Committee to authorize him to take any legal actions necessary to enforce the Commission's decision regarding the town's illegal attempt to reduce the fiscal year 09-10 appropriation. This authorization includes action before the Superior Court and in any other appropriate forum. And then number 2, he would like the committee to authorize he and his law firm to take any legal action necessary to reverse the town's illegal attempt to reduce the 10-11 appropriation. And then he explains also what that would include. Before, I'd like to just, before I start talking about it, is Steve's already going to be sending a letter to the treasurer, asking the treasurer, when is she going to perform her ministerial duties, based on the decision from the Supreme Court not to hear it. When will the funds be transferred? And in that letter, we'll have a deadline that we would like a response by. If we don't get an affirmative response by that timeline that Steve puts down, the deadline, he would then follow that course of action that you have, that if you saw fit, would approve that tonight, and you would then proceed. So that would just allow us not to have to wait, to our next meeting. And
Well, the problem I have with this is that this is basically saying, do whatever you feel like doing to pursuing that.
Well, he's telling you that he's going to go to Superior Court to issue a writ of mandamus to, I'll ask, well, Vicky's the lawyer. I mean,
Yes, yes,
Steve's
it's
I've heard it so
actually
many times.
It's actually a very well-trodden, well-laid-out path, statutory 1639 3.1 enforcement of final decisions that allow you, once you have a final decision from the Commissioner and/or Board of Regents, there's no more way to appeal. You can simply go to Superior Court and get a writ of mandamus to enforce the order, which would be basically kind of the court telling the town, do what the Commissioner told you to do, put the money back.
But so we give them certain time to react, because if, from what I understand, we have to stand our ground, but at the same time, we have to be rational that the public bodies don't just say, okay, I will do it right now. They have to meet.
Just so we-
Naturally, probably the first step in this would be like a conference with the judge, and that'd probably be the first thing I would come up. You try to get compliance with them voluntarily. You wouldn't just go to a judge.
But do we know that they don't want to comply?
Well, that's why we're sending the letter
Correct. So
to the treasurer. The treasurer will either, I would assume, on her own, make the decision to transfer the funds, or go to Attorney Tights, and it's my understanding that that's who's been advising her in the whole process, to say, well, look, I got this order, what do I do? So someone's going to have to, Attorney Tights would have to say to the treasurer, you either comply, she might be seeking direction, I would assume, from the town's attorney.
But you're telling me now that we assume. I think we have to stand the ground, but at the same time, we don't want to spend unnecessary money here.
We're not spending it.
I understand, but we have to say, well, this is a timeline. The timeline looks like this. 2 weeks, which is reasonable to respond, or whatever this reasonable timeline is. At this point, we are filing for that.
Yes.
And so you present to us a timeline in which we are going to say, yes, this looks reasonable, as opposed to saying, well, you know what you are doing, go and do it.
Well, Steve's going to do he was going to do the letter.
How long is he going to give the treasurer? 3 days?
3 business days.
That's plenty.
Well, that's all it is. It's a simple
Because it's
it's a simple.
I mean, we've known about this since March 14th.
Sure.
The council last night had an opportunity. They met in executive session. The treasurer had an opportunity to be there. She declined. They came back out and basically said they didn't address the transfer of the money at all. They basically said, we're going back to square one. We want your budget bifurcated at the FTR this year. It's like Groundhog Day. We're like starting all over again. I mean, so I think giving the treasurer 3 days to meet with Attorney Tights and decide if they're going to comply with state law, given that this thing has been going on for 2.5 years, is, in my opinion, more than ample
And
time.
Steve's not going to do anything. And again, our hope is that they do comply, and it ends, then and there. Unfortunately, and that's how I started out with my comments, it's unfortunate the council didn't clarify an action. Otherwise, we wouldn't have to even have this conversation. It would have been made clear. Since they didn't make it clear, unfortunately, now we still need to get an answer. And, the logical way and the appropriate way is to send the letter to the treasurer, notifying her, here's the timeline that we'd like to be notified by. If you don't notify us by this, I'm sure the letter would say what our steps are going to be. and it would be to go to Superior Court at that point.
And I agree, Mr. Pagani, that we shouldn't assume that the treasurer's not going to comply.
I would like-
I don't think the treasurer's had an opportunity to take a position, so I think it's important to give the treasurer time to take that, but I don't think it needs to be 2
No,
weeks.
and I also think it's important for residents to know that the treasurer has been advised by the town council's attorney throughout all this as to how to proceed with the funds. So it would be logical for her to go to him and say, okay, well, now what do I do? I would like to have thought the council would have directed him to do that already. They didn't. Regardless, we now have to, proceed down this path, I believe.
Mr. Mayor, could you please read the motion that was made last night by Mr. Coulter?
The motion,
So
excuse me.
everybody will know what we're
Yep.
talking about.
The motion, and thankfully Mrs. Black stayed until past midnight.
I mean, they're 12:15 last night.
And if Sally hadn't been there, we wouldn't have known, quite frankly, we wouldn't have known.
Because there
it
was no
No,
notification.
well, because it was so late, the papers, and whatever. But thank you for Mrs. Black for being vigilant. The statement, or the motion was, in light of the Supreme Court refusal to hear an appeal of the decision of the Board of Regents, and because the school department will automatically receive any and all state and federal aid funds, restricted or unrestricted, without and despite any action by the town council advises and requests the Budget Committee that the docket include appropriation from local sources only.
And could you mention the vote, please?
Yeah, the vote was 5-1. Councilor Leonard voted in opposition,
And Mr. Roberts
and
wasn't there.
Councilman Rodrick wasn't present.
So the question you would have from the beginning is, why is the town council even involved in this? Because nowhere in our charter, it was the financial town meeting, it was the people that voted for this, as we all know, and the people are the only one, the town council has nothing to do with our money. And so, this was, again, we have to go back to the town council meeting on the evening of December 13th, 2010. Now, this was not this treasurer, it was the other treasurer. In open session, the town council approved and supported the adjustment to return the overpayment, which was not of $367,165, back to the town of Tiverton from the school department for the fiscal year 2010 with a vote of 7-7. So that's what happened that night, December 13th, at about 11 o'clock at night. We all remember that. That's why we're here. So now, the town council was involved in that decision. They approved and supported the treasurer to do that, and they voted on it. So now, last night, when they came out, I was thinking they might talk about this treasurer, putting the money back where it was taken from, and that would have been a nice thing, but they didn't. They didn't mention anything about that. They just mentioned going to the budget committee tonight and asking them to put just the local number on, which, by the way, they did last year. They came before the budget committee and asked them to do that, and the budget committee said, no, we are not doing that because it's illegal, and they didn't do it. They put our total number on. So as Mrs. Polish said, we're back to square one. As I said before, it's the people's money, the people voted on it, and that's the way I see it.
I'd just like to, I didn't finish the entire resolution. I apologize. It was one last sentence. Authorizes and directs the town solicitor to communicate this including by memorandum, to the Budget Committee. No mention of us, that this was to be communicated to us. Speaks to itself.
So I asked Mrs. Mello, I went out into my car, it was about 12:15, and I read this in my car, and I said, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense. So I went back in to the town hall, and I said to the town clerk, could we please get the exact language, because I want to make sure it's correct, and we'll send it to Mrs. Pavo in the morning, because she told me she was going to be very busy all day. So then I found out this morning it never came, and this afternoon, so I went back at 3:30 to the town hall, and I said, I really need that language, because we have a meeting tonight. And it took a while, but as you see, it's here, and so we have this to work with.
So Vicky, this is pretty much between us and the treasurer at this point. The town
Always has
council is
been.
not.
Pretty much will be a ministerial.
But and again, it's important for everyone to understand, it's always been the treasurer's decision
Yeah.
for the funds, but the treasurer was advised by council to take a certain course and understand the whole context of everything. Residents need to be aware of that, if Attorney Robinson told us, you follow what your attorney tells you, even though you folks have authority to do certain things, you follow what your attorney tells you.
Well, and it was the council who was voting and directing Mr.
That's
Tights
correct.
to file an appeal with the Supreme Court
That's the
to,
point,
yeah,
Yes,
so.
and
it-
so-
The action would be against the town, but it would also run to all the officials.
Right. Right.
So,
Yes.
At the end of the meeting last night, didn't Andy say we have a hearing with the Department of Ed in April?
That's for the second year of the money,
So are they still going to
the
vote?
243.
We don't
Far-
know.
We don't know that they're not.
we have no idea, we're trying to find out. That's what we were trying to find out this afternoon, or actually this morning and
That was for
all
the
day.
243, the second year.
Because we believe if the first case stands, the second one, common
Same
sense would
result.
dictate the results should be the same, but that's, since it wasn't given to us, or in part or in whole, we have to follow those
Well,
next steps.
and that's part of what frustrates me. I'm looking at an advisory opinion we got in April in 2010, because when Rob Coulter was the vice chair of the Budget Committee and Jeff Karen was the chair, they started this whole, we can slice and dice your budget into two pieces. We went and got an advisory, April 2010, they said no. The town's appropriation must take the form of a total appropriation sufficient in and of itself to operate the public schools. They said that's just an advisory, it has no bearing. We said, okay. It went forward. They continued to try to bifurcate it. We had a hearing from the commissioner. Same exact ruling, June 17th, 2011. They came back with a decision that said, no, you can't. You have to have one amount. You have to appropriate your schools a budget. You can't just give them part of a budget and hope money's going to come in. Here we are, March 2012, the Supreme Court says we're not going to hear any arguments against this. This is the law, it's going to stand. And now to hear that we're back to where you want to split up your budget, it's like it never, to Mr. Fiore made the comment, it's like we're on Dallas and it was all a dream. It's like it never happened. 2.5 years of time, $100,000 of taxpayer money, it's just, I am outraged that we are now back at square one. Square one with this. And it's just, you're going to ignore the Supreme Court, and where's it going to end? It's not going to end until we get some people in that town council that are going to stop it. And that's where it's going to end.
And even before the advisory, if we want to go back to Wednesday night, March 25th, 2009, when the Budget Committee, as Mr. Polish said, Jeff Karen was the chair, and Rob Coulter was the vice chair, and that was the night when they first started this whole debate about bifurcation. And they talked a few hours about it, back and forth, and finally a motion was made by Mr. Perry to give the whole number, seconded, and back and forth again. And then there was
To
a
two.
motion made by someone else to bifurcate it, and that failed on the Budget Committee. The vote was 7 not to bifurcate it and a couple of abstentions. But anyway, the Budget Committee itself voted not to bifurcate the number. Then we went to the town meeting, they bifurcated, they had the vote lost by 5 and everything. But the interesting thing is when I got the official, we have the docket that's passed out at the town meeting, then I got the official signed and attested to docket, and it says in it that that number 249722 was voted on by the Budget Committee. That was never voted on by the Budget Committee. That number never came up at the night of the Budget Committee. So that's a very serious thing that I have right in this folder, if it has to go on to that.
I think,
Because this is signed and attested to, and it never happened, and I've pointed it out to a few people, and they know that it's true. So anyway, it's very, very complicated and serious, but I was astounded last night when I said, what? I said, back to where we started in 2009.
Well, I've also, as far as the FY 2010, 2011, we're trying to go on, more expeditious proceedings. If the town goes forward with it, we have discussed before going forward on a stipulated record as opposed to a hearing. Mr. Fiore has been very helpful to me in working to put that together for me. Whether that will succeed or not, I don't know, but
could you explain to us what this means?
instead of having a hearing and having people testify like in court, we would have a set of facts and exhibits.
Okay.
and
Everyone
this is
agrees
this,
to the
this is
facts.
that. Because the last case was kind of a paper case. I mean,
And we have
there's
plenty
no
of paper
dispute as to what happened.
to back it up.
Mm-hmm.
There shouldn't be.
Does the Commissioner of Education often hear a case that is essentially a carbon copy of a case that she's already ruled on? I mean, it surprises me that they would hear the case about the $243,000 when it's the same case, just the next year's numbers, that they've already heard and ruled on.
And that's why we're trying to get this done, get that, if it comes to fruition, we get it put through as expeditiously as possible. And yeah, I mean, I would be very inclined to say, hey, you already ruled on this, but it's a different year, potentially different facts, so unfortunately.
The facts aren't completely the same.
Right, that
So
instead
that
of
how
Philip transferring all
right.
the money and then took back, Denise.
They handled it a little
Denise is
differently.
the current treasurer is taking the position that she didn't transfer it all and then take it back. She never transferred it to begin with.
It's really when you look at the audit and crunch those numbers that you realize
Right.
what was.
So it's a little different.
Nobody went out at the town council meeting and voted and said, we're supporting the town treasurer doing this.
I mean-
It was more under the radar.
And again, when Sally read me the motion, I had the same reaction this morning. I go, I don't understand it, in the sense, it didn't settle anything for us. And all along, alls we heard was, we want this settled. The Supreme Court will settle it one way or the other. Well, they
It
did.
will be done.
Well, they did. They settled in our favor, the school committee's favor. And all of us, and now, no action's taken?
Well,
Very
and-
disappointing.
And how it's just such a distraction, and we really need to move forward for the good of the community, and apparently we only needed to do that when they thought we would settle. Now that we have an answer that they don't like, apparently that doesn't matter. And that's what frustrates me. Is it really for the community? This is a waste.
I think between Sally and as chair of the committee and you, Bill, and Doug, what you have to do is probably have some form of a press release where you are going to describe all the facts, because
Yep.
people will be completely confused what this whole thing is about. Completely confused
Yep.
what's going on. And under these circumstances, we have no other option but simply stand our ground and demand that the ruling of the commissioner of the court is going to be upheld by anyone in this town, because everyone has to follow the same law.
So I'm asking for a motion, if the treasurer doesn't give us the contingent that the funds do not get transferred to us based on the letter we're going to send, that Steve has pre-authorization for those two steps that you see before you in numbers 1 and 2.
Oh, it's Danielle.
So I'll make a motion that, did you want to?
Can you read it?
Yeah.
Do you want to read it? I'll make a motion that contingent on receiving no affirmative response from the treasurer regarding the transfer of funds, that the Tiverton School Committee authorizes Robinson and Clapman to take any and all legal actions to enforce the commissioner's decision regarding the town's illegal attempt to reduce the fiscal year 2009-2010 appropriation. This authorization includes action before the Superior Court and any other appropriate forum. Further, that the Tiverton School Committee authorizes Robinson and Clapman to take any and all legal actions necessary to reverse the town's illegal attempt to reduce the fiscal year 2010-2011 appropriation. This authorization includes action before the Superior Court, Commissioner of Education, Board of Regents for Elementary and Secondary Education, and any other appropriate forum.
I'll second the motion.
Now, what about Danielle? Do you want us to catch you up on all that?
If you guys are, go ahead and see, because you're in the middle of voting, right?
Oh, but we just made the motion, we can certainly,
Just discussion.
discussion.
Oh,
right?
okay.
Well, we're not
You've
voting
already
yet.
had it?
No.
No, we're
discussing.
we're
okay.
in discussion.
So we're ready for discussion.
So, Mr. Mayor, could you explain it to Danielle?
Yes, Danielle, because last night the council really didn't address the issue at all, there was does Danielle have a copy of the?
No, we're looking at
No,
this
she's
one.
No.
motion, right?
Bill's talking
Yeah,
about the
I'm just
motion
talking about the
last night.
motion right now. The only discussion on the part of the council regarding this issue, the Supreme Court not hearing their appeal, was the motion you see in front of you. The discussion the committee and I had was that this really doesn't address the issue at all. as far as whether their intent is to direct the Attorney Tights to tell Treasurer to give us the funds or not. So what Attorney Robinson will be doing, he's already drafting a letter that we're going to send to the Treasurer and ask the Treasurer to perform her ministerial duties and uphold the Board of Regents' decision, and which would be to transfer the funds back to the school department, with the caveat that there'd be a window for her to perform, to do it, 3 days, to make this occur. If it comes back, as the motion was just read, that the funds haven't been placed into our account by that time, that we authorize Attorney Robinson to do what that motion, the two-part motion that Deb just read, would take place. So we're giving the treasurer an opportunity, whether to seek guidance from Attorney Tights or to take the action herself. The letter would provide a window of opportunity for the funds to be transferred. Hopefully that occurs, and the matter, at least with the 367s, resolved. If for whatever reason the funds weren't transferred, we would need to pursue our position, which would be to, step one would be to go to Superior Court and enjoin, I'm not using the right word, but to enforce the Board of Regents' decision regarding the 367.
Now, what was when they came down with their decision, what was their direction at that point?
The Supreme Court just didn't hear it. They refused to hear the writ.
So there was no direction, no
No,
giving money back?
which means
That
it-
means that the
That
Board
is
of
their
Regents
direction.
and the Commissioner's decision stands.
Which was.
It reverts back to the lower court, or in this case, the governing body, which is the Board of Regents.
And that's typical of a writ,
Yes.
correct? I've seen a
Correct.
couple of
Yeah.
others where it's basically one sentence saying.
Yeah, if they
We're
don't
not
want to hear
hearing
it, because that's the type of case it was. They didn't have to give a rationale for the denial of the appeal. I think that was it in a nutshell.
And so, may I read the motion?
The motions are number 1 and 2 under
Number 1 and 2 on the
Very
bottom.
bottom of the page?
on the very
That
bottom of the resolution.
Oh, okay,
It's
got it.
1, and then if you flip it, it's 2.
It's not going to be a resolution.
No, it's just,
a motion.
no, it's the motion.
Yeah, we didn't do the
Motion.
top part, just the 1 and 2.
And so have we had any correspondence with the town since?
We have,
And there's been no response? No.
today, there's been no response, and the motion that was made last night simply authorized the solicitor to communicate the motion to the Budget Committee.
And you contacted him, you said, on the 15th?
Well, the day after,
The day
or a
after.
couple days afterwards, we notified Attorney Tights and asked, what's the intent going to be? And like,
He wrote back and said he didn't have a copy of the motion.
so Vicky made sure he had a copy. And then we sent all day trying to communicate, what's the intention of what's going to happen here? And we haven't been able to get a response.
Which is why we wanted to give the treasurer a
All
three-day
right,
window.
and it is the treasurer who is ultimately responsible. So it's logical to see if she will transfer the funds, I believe.
So you think that 3 days is,
Business days from the receipt of the letter. It's not a major, it's literally stroking a computer and just moving the funds over.
no, I'm just talking about seeking legal advice and all of that.
Well, as Deb pointed out, this has been talked about for a year and a half.
Right, and the writ was March 14th.
And the writ was the
which was
14th, if you want to go into a
while
shorter
ago.
window. So there's been plenty of time on the town side to, I would think, to develop a response.
Yep.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. I had a second?
Yes.
Carol.
Carol seconded.
Okay.
Can I,
Yeah, go ahead.
can I just add in a preference? So, we're making a motion, this is all legal as to authorization for legal
Mhm.
action. And so, where's the portion regarding the treasurer on this?
The letter's already being sent.
Okay.
It's not part of the motion.
Okay, so the letter itself says that it
The
has the
the letter will
3
have,
days.
I haven't even seen it, it hasn't been sent yet, but the letter's being drafted.
And the
will
first
be
part
sent.
of my motion said contingent on.
That's correct.
A response to that.
a response. In other words, nothing's going to happen until we get a response
Right.
from the treasurer.
Gotcha.
That's all contingent upon, and rightfully so, to give the treasurer adequate amount of time to respond.
And was the information that was sent from the Board of Regents, that was made clear and a copy has already been given to the treasurer?
This is long.
Yeah, I would think that Attorney Tights did that. As
You mean the
town-
one from July?
Yep.
I would assume, we're not privy to that, I would assume that council has advised her.
Mr. Fiore, didn't you talk to the treasurer today?
Oh, numerous times.
You talked to-
Okay.
So it's
I
not
was
like she
making,
doesn't know.
yeah.
The auditor clearly had a copy when he reserved the funds.
And the treasurer hadn't received any direction this morning, because Doug did call over
Just to-
and said, have you received any direction? And all day, we have not had an answer. So apparently she hasn't.
And so here's my question, wouldn't they need to, if she's waiting for direction and they don't have a meeting in between those 3 days, is everything just coming from Attorney Tights, or?
Well, she's
or-
independent. She doesn't need direction from the council.
Okay.
Attorney Tights, I would assume, again, he would say, the law is this, you need to follow it. I mean, I'm not an attorney, but I think that's what you tell your client. Right?
Seems not if he felt it was appropriate to fight it to begin with.
Well, that means we go to court.
He
Then
did fight it.
he
That's
did.
over.
The fight's over, and it comes down to now, if the money's not transferred, then we're going to enforce the order. I mean, it's unfortunate that we're being placed in this position, but in my mind, the battle's over. The fight's been fought. The South Supreme Court wouldn't hear it. It ends there, I would think.
Well, and that's why I said, 2.5 years, we've been patient. Okay, you want a hearing, we'll have a hearing. You want to, appeal to Supreme Court, we understand that.
Because
but-
everyone wanted an answer. Everybody on both sides of the question
Right, but now you don't like the
wanted an
answer,
answer.
and
Well, we
we're,
got one.
we're back to square one.
Just as
But-
if they ruled against us, we'd have to have dealt with it.
Well, and they did with the Fall River tuition.
Right, and we dealt with
said,
it.
we'll accept
Right.
the ruling,
Right.
and we did.
That was it?
Yeah, there was no question at
Put
that
it
point,
in
but
The general fund for educational purposes only. That's what they said. Any more questions?
I don't, thank you, sorry.
It's okay, no, I'm glad it's okay. Mr. Burgundy?
Nope, I have all my questions answered.
All set, thank you,
Okay,
Sal.
all in favor? Thank you. Tiverton Prevention Coalition, I'm sorry, Rebecca, we made you wait so long.
Doug, you're all set. Thanks, Vicki.
I wasn't sure if this was going to be introduced by Mr. Rearick. The agenda item before you tonight is in regard to my application for another grant, prevention grant. This one is titled Sober Truth on Preventing Underage Drinking, and it's referred to as a STOP grant. It's a request for $50,000 per year for 4 years, so a total of $200,000. When we received the drug-free community grant, which is the total of $625,000, it put us in this pool of being eligible to apply for additional grant funding, which seems remarkable to me that once you get money, you're eligible for more. But that's in our favor, so we're gonna work on that. So my question for you tonight is, would the school be willing to once again serve as the fiscal agent?
My recommendation is that we do, and Rebecca does a much better job of explaining the grant since she wrote it than I could.
And there's no match. It's just,
There is, that was in my list of things to say, there is no match this time. The first grant, the large grant, is $125,000, and we have to match it 100%, which for the most part we've been able to do with in-kind contributions and, certainly no cash, but, through our partnerships with local organizations, et cetera, we got the match. In the school, some of the things that the school provides, like an office and, those things, those count toward
good.
that match. This time, there's no match required. One of the benefits to the school in this budget is that I've added some indirect costs, which will help, especially at the fiscal administration level. Carolyn Mendes has been amazing with keeping up with all of the federal check requests and all that. We tried to make it as simple as possible, and I think going forward, it will be very simple for her since the system is in place. But getting the system in place was, she put a tremendous amount of effort into that, and this will be an opportunity to appreciate her for that. There are a couple of other things that hopefully will be of direct benefit to the school. I've been working with Chief Blakey and discussing increasing school resource officer position. Right now, Officer Ken Cabral is here at the high school about once a week. We'd love to see that expand. We would love to see it actually back where it was a few years ago, which was a full-time school resource officer for the district. We're still far shy of that, but if we could add another day, perhaps that would be a good goal for us.
What is the funding source for this grant?
It's it's a federal funding. It's through Substance Abuse, Mental Health Services Administration, SAMHSA, under the Office of National Drug Control Policy, ONDCP. So it's a complementary grant to the one that we've received. That one focuses on marijuana, prescription drugs, other drugs of abuse. This is solely for underage drinking, so it really narrows the focus. And it will start with the federal fiscal year, which is October 1st.
And thank you again for all your hard work.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Really amazing.
So you just need a
Just a
motion.
motion to approve us
So
being the fiscal
moved.
agent.
Do I have a second?
Second.
And during NEAS, that was one of the things the teachers asked was to have an officer back.
It would be
on
nice.
Campus and middle school too, so that's great. All those in favor? Any questions? No? Okay, thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Becca.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, the next thing was the proposed legislation. It was a Senate bill by Mr. Edwards, Representative Edwards had written a letter to me. And what I think we're going to do on that is, there'll be quite a few that we're supposed to look at. And Mr. Burgundy, if you can get those together, you know how you do that for legislation.
Yep.
And we'll spend a night on the different ones we want to send resolutions to, and we'll invite him to come maybe and speak to us about them.
Yep.
But that one was a concern to take the fiduciary power away from us and give it to the town council.
I believe we did a resolution on that, didn't we? That's what he's referencing here? It's our
No, someone
resolution?
sent a
No, we didn't.
sent him a
We didn't.
Someone else
resolution-
did.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
So I just wanted you to have
Yeah,
that letter.
there's probably a whole round of new resolutions we
That's what I
probably
mean.
need to
There's a
do.
whole bunch of them that we will have to look at. They're
Yeah.
very serious.
Binding arbitration.
As to our
Yeah,
role.
yeah.
Contract
Well,
continuation.
there's several bills that are being proposed to eliminate, ones to
They really
eliminate
are.
school committees, and
Okay.
others to, again, allow.
So we'll kind of try to
allow
tackle
town
them all at
councils to
once.
sign
We'll just put 'em-
contracts.
If you can do that, Mr.
That'd be a great
Put it
idea.
to the legislative committee, and then
Okay.
we'll do it. That'll be a good.
When you
good
get your
thing.
pie.
And this isn't time sensitive?
No, we just wanted us, I just wanted you to see the letter, because I send you everything I get, so we can all share.
Well, it's time sensitive in that they're going to,
Oh, I know.
It's
It has
this-
to be soon, the next meeting.
yeah, it's this budget
The
session.
next meeting.
for them.
probably, to bring some forward. Okay. So that would be it. Is that it, Mr. Rarick?
Under announcements, we had a very positive readout from the NEASC visitation team. They spent 4 days here. The readout from the chair was very positive. Pointed out the two areas that we knew going in where we needed work. It was in professional development and common planning time. You know, they did highlight that, but it was nothing, I mean, I think we all talked about it.
Just to be expected.
But overall, it was a very good, positive initial report.
And I see we have a letter in here from the building official.
Yes, Mr. Ames did respond to my letter. You know, he's saying that we should have done it by the start of the school year, even though it wasn't in his draft letter, that, you know, the letter we got a couple weeks ago, but he's saying we can do the work over the summer.
Okay, so having it in our budget will address this.
Yes.
And you're still planning on meeting?
Yes, I
with
got tied
Gonzalo?
up, we were going to do it yesterday. My schedule required me to change. We're going to meet in a couple weeks when Gareth comes back from vacation. I just couldn't do it yesterday. They were very,
But,
Yes,
and so
we-
we'll look forward to that.
yeah, the communication, you know,
About the new
Jim's.
process and
Yep.
timeline
Yep.
for inspection and notifying us, et cetera. So we
Yeah.
don't find ourselves in a similar situation.
Absolutely, and
again.
that's what I told Jim in my email, was that, you know, we just wanted to so we weren't in this spot again.
Right.
You know, to have a
I happened
timeline.
to run into one of the people who was involved with the NEASC, and they were very complimentary. So I certainly thank you and your staff, Mr. Fizette, for
Yes,
all of
you
the
did a
work.
Great job. Very nice, thank you.
That whole entire week.
As we know.
For a year and a half, was it? I mean, it was a 3 or 4 day visit, but I know they
And-
worked for well over a
Right,
year to prepare
and
for it.
again, you hear always criticisms of teachers, this, that, and the other thing. Our teachers at the high school, they do at every level, volunteered a lot of time, because as you know, we couldn't get half-days. So even though you maximized every meeting day we had contractually, teachers still worked well beyond, the time allocated, and especially to Ms. Arujo and Mr. Soares, the steering committee, and Steve and Jack. It really is something to be very proud of, the work they did and the time they put in.
Anyone else have any announcements? No?
Motion to adjourn?
To the town hall.
Second.
Second?